Hi, my name is Annie Noonan and I'm the Senior Writer at Diversity Q. Today I'm speaking with Liz Ashall-Payne, who is the founding CEO of Orca, an innovative digital health service. Today I'm speaking with her about her business journey, her recent win at the Women in IT Awards UK for Entrepreneur of the Year, and what it's like being a female entrepreneur in this climate today. So Liz, my first question for you is, what's your founding story behind Orca and why did you start it?
Thank you for talking to me today. So my story starts from when I was 15, and when we're 15 we get asked a question at school, which is, what do you want to be, or what do you want to do? And I didn't know the answer to that question, and I don't think most people do. But for me, I didn't know what I wanted to be from a job perspective, but I really knew that I was passionate about wanting to help people. And so that naturally took me into being interested in healthcare. But I also knew that I was quite squeamish, and so I didn't want to be a doctor or a nurse. So I started to look at other careers within health and healthcare. And I fell upon speech and language therapy. And I thought, this is the job for me. On my report, it always said talks too much in the class. So I thought, this is it. So I went off to university, did my degree, and I was really excited for my first day in clinic because I thought, today I'm going to start helping people. But at the end of that day, I'd only seen 6 people and there were massive waiting lists. And I thought, well, what about everybody else? How can I help more people? And that's been my driving passion for almost the last 25 years. And what I did was I started on a journey of really trying to strip out waste in a pathway so that I could release more time for me to care. But then fast forward 15 years and I saw the rise of digital technologies and digital health. And I thought, this is the answer. If we can deploy great technology to people, millions of people can have access to it all at the same time without me being reduced by my capacity, and they can have access to it when they need it rather than when I'm available. And so I thought, this is the answer. But it wasn't. And the reason it wasn't was because nobody was using these technologies. And the reason people weren't using them was ultimately because they didn't trust them and didn't know where to find them. And so Orca was founded on that principle. And what we do is we review and evaluate technologies to build trust. And then we create digital health or app libraries and formularies so that doctors, nurses and therapists can now pick and, importantly, prescribe technologies to their patients like you would do a drug.
To what extent do you think the pandemic has shifted the digital healthcare landscape, and perhaps how you operate Orca and how it services patients?
When it comes to health and digital health, we've seen a massive explosion of digital health technologies. So every day, 90 to 250 new technologies join the marketplace, which is already over 360,000. What we also know is that citizens are more likely to now download digital health technologies. So 5 million people every day now download a digital health app. And what we also know is that healthcare professionals are much more ready to recommend or prescribe technology to their patients whilst we're all working remotely and whilst we're not coming together in big groups. And we've seen a real interest in people wanting to be prescribed these technologies. So the conversion rate post the recommendation from a health and care professional is actually very, very similar to that of prescription of a drug. So 71% of people who get recommended a technology will go on and use it. Only 74% of people who get prescribed a drug go and pick them up. So I think we've seen a huge shift. And then obviously now in the recovery period where we're trying to recover from the issues around the pandemic, waiting times, we're all looking to technology and thinking, well, how can that now support the recovering well?
To what extent do you think digital healthcare apps and related services are empowering those who maybe have accessibility issues in terms of visiting a GP or going to a pharmacy? Do you see what you're doing with these healthcare apps as a sort of inclusive experience for those groups?
This is a really good question, because what we hear you know, a big agenda now is the digital divide. And what we do when we evaluate technology, we're not just evaluating its quality, we're evaluating who it's best for. And that includes a range of inclusion agendas. So does this work for somebody who's got a visual impairment? Does this work for somebody who's got a hearing impairment? Does this work for somebody who's got a cognitive impairment? Does it fit best based on the evidence for somebody of a certain demographic profile? And so the reason that's really important is because at the point of recommendation, it's not just, oh, this is a good technology, I'm going to recommend it to all my patients. This is about finding the right technology for the person who's sat in front of me or who needs this. Now, what that means is that people who really want access to digital health technologies can now have it. And what it means is those people who don't, there is efficiency gains and there is capacity released, so that the face-to-face consultations can happen for those people who want that. You know, digital isn't for everybody. And one of the great things about health and healthcare globally is the fact that we have choice. So myself, as an example, I live with type 1 diabetes. I'm really busy. I don't have time to go to the doctor's office. I love the fact that I can now have remote consultations. But somebody else, like my dad, he's on warfarin. He wants to have a face-to-face consultation. So let's just help people to find the right route to the right healthcare for them.
How diverse do you find is this sector for entrepreneurs? Do you find you're often the only woman in the room at certain events?
So I was at a conference yesterday and I was at HIMSS in Orlando last week. And I would say that on the floor, if you will, the diversity is growing. However, when you look at senior roles, leadership positions, there is much less diversity. And I do still think it's an issue. And it's an issue for all the reasons that we know. You know, as women, our lives are different because we go and have babies. We have different expectations put on us to do different things. And so I think that what I see quite often is that I'm quite unusual being a female founder and a female chief exec in this space. Now, I do think that is starting to change. I mentor a lot of founders, and I definitely see more female founders coming forward to say, it's been great to be able to see you and you doing what you do, because that's given me some confidence that a woman can do this. And I think that, you know, we have to have, and I don't like to say this because I don't see myself as a role model, but we have to have visual representations of female leaders in this space for younger people to feel that, oh, that is an option for me. I'm not just seeing a sea of middle-aged, grey hair, white men quite often on the shop floor, which, to be fair, was exactly what I did see 15 years ago.
You were starting Orca and you were getting off the ground. Could you tell me a little bit about the funding you went for? And did you receive any sort of resistance or bias, perhaps due to your gender or any hesitation in that area?
When I started Orca, it was it was almost like a fairy tale, actually. So I was obsessed with the problem, as I've shared with you, and my passion was I wanted to help people. I hadn't planned on setting this up as a business. I had my own consultancy business at the time, but I was obsessed with this problem, and I talked to anybody who talked to me about it. And I had a conversation with a guy who had digital health technologies, and they wanted advice about how I might be able to help them get into the healthcare sector. And I was explaining that the challenges aren't specific to their technologies. It was a systemic issue of trust and unawareness of these technologies. And he said, well, write me a business plan and I'll put it in front of some investors. And I'm optimistic, I'm an activist. So I went home and wrote this business plan and sent it off to him. And then the following week, the landline rang, which almost never happens. And a voice said, is that Liz? And I said, yes. And it said, oh, it's Sir Terry Lee here. So anybody who hasn't heard of him, he used to be the chief executive of Tesco's. He changed fundamentally the way that we supermarket shop, bringing in the Tesco club card. And he said, I've had a business plan sent to me. I'd like to talk to you about it. And we had a Dragon's Den style conversation. And then him and another chap called Bill Curry of the William Curry Group. So he was the initial investor in ASOS, Boohoo, Badgal. they said that they would invest. And I have to say, I have been so supported by them. I know that that isn't necessarily something that you hear quite often from founders, but they've been like mentors to me. They've always been really open and transparent. And actually, they're very motivated to support women. So Bill, for example, bought an all-girls school. He's got 2 daughters himself. He supports other women because he's seen the benefit of having women in leadership positions across businesses that he's invested in. So I've been really fortunate, but I know that I'm very different to everybody else, predominantly when I hear other founders talking.
When you're speaking to these other female founders or budding female founders, what advice would you give to them about accessing funding? Are there certain avenues that you might think, are they a bit more accessible, such as, angel investment or VC?
I'd say it's more fundamental than what fund you go for. I'd say be picky about who you're going to be working with, the individuals within the fund, and make sure that you've got an alignment of mission, make sure you've got an alignment of values, and don't just go for the money. Because it's a little bit like getting married to somebody. You're going to be with them for a long, long time, and you wouldn't marry somebody after the first date. So spend a bit of time, get to know the people who are going to be sat on your board, who are going to be helping you shape the business moving forward, and get a sense as to whether their values are aligned with yours, get a sense as to how they feel about the fact that you're female. And if it doesn't feel right, don't do it. We've just gone through a fundraise recently. We brought in a new VCT, and we were fortunate. We had 8 term sheets on the table, but when we were thinking through who do we want at the table with us, it's not just money that we're interested in. It's cultural fit, it's passion, it's mission and values.
And as you say, it can be so tempting to just go for the money, but if there's not that alignment, the relationship and the support the entrepreneur might receive may not be right for them.
And then that can fundamentally ruin the business. It's all about relationships, and it's all about being on the same page. And it's tough, it's tough growing a business. And if you've not got the right people supporting you, it's almost impossible, I would suggest.
And I know you touched briefly at the beginning of this conversation about the reasons why you started Orca, and I know you've had a few roles in the NHS. I just wanted to get some more insight from you about how pivotal those roles were in forming your decision to enter the digital health space because of the problems you were seeing.
That's the ultimate piece. So I really understood the problem. I'd experienced the problem as a healthcare professional, as a system leader. I talked to people about the problems that they were experiencing, and I ultimately fell in love with that problem and was desperate to solve it. And that's what gets you up. That's what helps you get through those challenging times. Now, whether that, but obviously there is also a real challenge there, because my background had been in public sector. I did have my own business in consultancy where I stepped out and I worked internationally as well as in the NHS. But setting up a company which is product-based is very, very different. And I think that having had the background that I had and the passion for the problem did spur me on. It absolutely did spur me on. And I feel really grateful for my background. I absolutely would not carve my career out any differently. Every step of the journey, I've learned something new every way. And now I feel that I'm actually able to start to scratch the surface on my passion of helping more people.
Touching back on the investment subject, if you could get some angel investors and VC investors in a room and give them advice about how they can attract more female-led businesses and support them better once they fund them, just drawing on your experience, what would you say to them?
It'd probably be the same that I'd say to the founder, which is be yourself. Don't feel you have to put a mask on. We all, it took me to probably be in my mid-30s to realise I'm just going to be me, and I'm just going to be the best version of who I am. And I think sometimes earlier in my career particularly, I felt I had to wear a mask and act in a certain way. And I definitely met some investors on the road that we've just gone through who seem to be playing a role rather than being themselves. And that massively put me off, because I want to be able to connect with somebody, not just theoretically, but also emotionally. I want to be able to connect with somebody as a person. And so be that person that you are, be honest about who you are, because equally you don't want to invest in somebody if you don't gel and you don't have the same passion and mission. So I'd probably say the advice is not dissimilar on both ways. I think that you can be explicit though in saying we're actively seeking female founders or female entrepreneurs. I think that you have to explain why. Don't just say it, don't give it lip service, explain why, because it's quite topical and people see through that very quickly.
You explained you had that background in healthcare, you know what the problems were that you wanted to help solve. I wondered if you believed as a female founder that you brought a certain diversity of perspective to the business, but simply being a woman in the space.
I like to think so. You probably get a better answer from the people in the team, but I'd like to think so. I'll give you one example. So when we were about 3 years into the business, we were obviously employing people, and what I definitely started to see from people who started at graduate level was when there was a male and a female counterpart, the male was definitely leaning in and asking for promotions, asking for pay increases, and the female counterpart wasn't. And it wasn't a skill, knowledge or experience thing. It was a confidence piece. And so I decided that I wanted to really deal with that head on. And so we started, so that's nearly 4 years ago now, women empowerment sessions, which run every 4 to 6 weeks. And in those sessions, we bring together all the women from across the business. We have inspirational speakers and we talk openly about some taboo topics. So obviously being a woman in IT is one thing, but what about a woman of race? What about a woman of different sexuality? How does that, how can we support those deeper agendas? But also, we talk about things like menopause. These are taboo topics that we just not opened up. And I think that having a female chief exec that's confident enough to say, we're going to have this conversation and we're going to deal with it head on, I think opens up a transparency and probably helps, the ELT at Orca, my team is male, but they're now open to have that conversation, and they feel now much more comfortable in having some of those conversations because they weren't quite sure what they should or should not be talking about. And so I think we've opened up the dialogue. I'm not saying we've got it all right. I don't think anybody ever has, but I think having a female chief executive and founder has helped to open up that conversation.
So you've answered my question after that really beautifully about how to practice inclusion as a business leader. Could you tell me a little bit more maybe of other ways that you practice inclusion internally in your organisation, maybe well-being, flexible working? Where are you going with that?
Yeah, absolutely. So from a wellbeing perspective, we actually have a wellbeing lead, and we put a lot of focus on wellbeing. Now, that's not just a female piece, that's a whole organisation piece. We don't do flexi working, but we do flexible working. And the difference there is we work to outcomes. If you're delivering your work, great. It doesn't matter if you start at 9, 10, 11. We don't want to micromanage either. And we also have a culture of putting family first. So, and I lead that. So, for example, next week I'm on a trade mission. And a week ago, I got an invite from school for my 8-year-old's concert. And I said, I need to get a flight back home. I need to be at that. And I'm definitely attending. I've not been to anything like that for the last 2 years. He's 8. I've not got many more to go. That takes the priority. And again, I think it's leading with actions, not just with words. When we first started to create policies as a company, because obviously when you first start up, you don't have anything like that. We did it as was required. And when the first lady got pregnant, we asked her to help us shape that policy. What does good look like, and what would you want to see from us? And then we've iterated it since. As you know, new dads, and we've asked them to help us with parental leave policies. So you know, we try and be inclusive at every step of the way and work from a very practical perspective.
And that's so interesting, bringing employees from certain characteristics and with their own particular challenges into the solution of devising the policies. You often don't hear that, do you? You often hear it being implemented
top down.
Yes. So
yeah, we don't have that culture at all, and we iterate things all the time based on the feedback that we get from our teams. They are what are driving the business forward, and so we want to help them to be the best people that they can be.
That's fantastic. And now I want to kind of circle back to something I mentioned right at the beginning, which is your recent win at the Women in IT Awards UK, where you won Entrepreneur of the Year. I just want to hear from you, what's the reaction been like since your win?
I felt the love, I've got to say. I was really surprised. When I went to the award, I'm not going to lie, I went on my own. I didn't really tell many people I was going because it was fierce competition, and I was really proud to be shortlisted. And there was a highly commended in that category, and I thought, oh, I'd love to win that. And then obviously they said somebody else's name, and I thought, oh well, it's amazing to have been shortlisted. But then when they said my name out, honestly, it felt like I was in a movie, and it was an absolute surprise. But the amount of pride and honour and humbleness that I felt was massive. The reaction has been absolutely overwhelmingly positive. I mean, on LinkedIn, the love I have felt from people, because I have always been myself, and I have always talked both about the opportunity, the success, but also the challenges. You know, it's real, and I've always been myself on that journey. And so I've had the most phenomenal feedback, and also had a lot of ladies reach out. Just yesterday, I mentioned I was at a conference, and a lady said, oh, I just wanted to come and talk to you because I've just founded a company, but I had a baby 4 weeks ago, and I'm not sure whether I'm going to be able to do this. Can I have, will you become my mentor? And I was like, yeah, absolutely. And by the way, let's meet in person and bring your baby along. Let's do this as a walk-in meeting. So yeah, I feel really proud and very honoured to have won. Yeah, amazing reaction.
You've just touched on there the power of awards such as the Women in IT Awards for simply amplifying the conversation about what the position of women in tech and the networking that comes from that and people reaching out. So I mean, the power that holds. It's
huge. It's you know, we are a networked society now, and we all use social media to network further. And I mentioned that I was in Orlando last week, and people were talking about it there to me. And I think it provides hope, doesn't it, for us all, that somebody like me can achieve that award.
Thank you so much. Such eloquent answers.
Thank you so much. Really.